Well, welcome back to another week's analysis behind the news. First of all, what I want to talk about is something that I get refreshed about every time I'm out in the field, and that is the fact that these newspapers pretty much are victims of a central source of information. You see all sorts of papers using the same photographs. For instance, this is in USA Today, and this is in the Wall Street Journal, but they're the same photographs. And you'll see that the headlines and the articles, etc., all pretty much stick to the same theme, the same story, the same details. So that no matter what paper you read from coast to coast, Canada to Mexico, you're getting the same story. It's a centralization of the news sources. And if that centralization, if that news source is giving you the wrong story, then it gets into all the papers. And it carries over into the media as well. One thing I noticed this morning, because I look at photographs when I get a newspaper, this is out of the Wall Street Journal, and I don't look particularly at the thing that they want me to look at. I look beyond the foreground. I look at the background of these photographs. And here, this is a photograph supposedly of El Sadr militia rallying to protect the city from the Sunnis invading from the north in Iraq into Baghdad. And they talk about these men, they're marching. Well, actually, they're not marching. They're standing still. Well, it's a small detail. But there's 16 or 20 people in the foreground. And you'll notice when you look at the photograph, the streets are empty. All the sidewalks are empty. There's nobody out there cheering them on and all the rest that you'd normally think you'd see in such of a situation, or at least other people around. But then in the background, and it looks as though there's another unit marching behind them with a black flag. Actually, it's a small group of individuals with their back to the camera. They're listening to somebody, or they're gathering around doing whatever they're doing, but they're not marching. They're not part of this unit. They may not even be part of the so-called parade of whatever this is supposed to be. But it's a canned shot. It's a posed shot. So always look behind what the caption says at the bottom, because as you read the caption, you remember what the caption told you. And if the photograph in any way resembles what the caption is, you'll think that you've gotten proof through the photograph. I've seen countless examples of that. This is just this morning. I've got some in my folders in my office and things that are so blatantly bad relative to what the caption says versus what the photograph shows. There's no resemblance to the two whatsoever. At any rate, I was mentioning last week about the hypocrisy of McCain and others in regard to all this Middle East situation. And I wanted to bring forward this week a little more background as to what I was talking about to get you to understand a little bit better of what's really been going on in the Middle East and North Africa. And so I kind of sketched it out very primitively, just put it on a whiteboard so that you could follow it, and it'd be notes for me at the same time. But let me bring this in to the picture and start with John McCain. Now, John McCain is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the New World Order outfit that wants a one world government with an economic system run by government, which in essence, in a word, is socialism. McCain has been a member of this organization for a New World Order for decades. He is also chairman of what's called the International Republican Institute. And the International Republican Institute is funded by the United States government. Now, the State Department has always had a member of the CFR in charge of the State Department. And the State Department funds the National Endowment for Democracy. Now, the National Endowment for Democracy, in turn, funds the International Republican Institute. It also funds Freedom House, and it also funds the National Democratic Institute. Now, if these three institutions weren't doing what this institution wanted, they wouldn't be funded. And if this institution wasn't doing what the government wanted, they wouldn't be funded. So there's not a direct arrow from the State Department to these organizations. They do it by a carom movement through the Endowment for Democracy. Now, these three organizations had agents in Egypt. Now these agents in Egypt helped bring about, and stimulated all of the demonstrations in the so-called Egyptian Spring in the streets of Cairo, which brought down the Mubarak government, and in its place the Morsi government, led by the Muslim Brotherhood, was put in power in Egypt. It became so obvious very quickly that this was a very leftist, militant, so-called Muslim organization, that the secular military performed a coup. Now keep in mind, what happened here, by the way, these agents were arrested by the Mubarak government because it was obvious that these agents of these organizations had brought about these riots and the downfall of Mubarak. And it came from the State Department under the leadership of people like McCain, and all of them involved in the Council on Foreign Relations. He's the Council on Foreign Relations chairman, Council on Foreign Relations chairman of Freedom House, Council on Foreign Relations chairman of the National Democratic Institute. So they arrest these people. McCain and others raise a hue and cry that they have stifled freedom and so on and so forth, and these poor individuals in Egypt, these Americans, needed to be brought to the United States and get away from this oppressive military government that had arrested them after just between the time that Mubarak fell and the elections were held. So they brought these agents back to the United States, but afterward they were tried under the military coup and found guilty. Now they can never go back to Egypt. And they were found guilty of bringing about these riots and street demonstrations that overthrew the government. Then they became obvious that they were jihadists. The military took over again. And as soon as the military took over again, McCain went back to Egypt with Graham, demanding that democracy be restored in Egypt. Now, what is democracy in Egypt? It was the Muslim Brotherhood. See, they were the ones that were just taken out. They were the ones that were elected. But he didn't mention the Brotherhood in his speeches. He just called it democracy. But had they done what he demanded, it would have meant the restoration of the Muslim Brotherhood. So, in addition, McCain makes demands that we supply the rebels in Syria. Just demands that we've got to overthrow this oppressive regime in Syria, and we've got to arm these rebels. Then these rebels, using these arms, invade Iraq. And then McCain says we need to defend and save Iraq from these jihadists. Well, in the meantime, while we're doing this, by the way, we start to see photographs of McCain showing up on Facebook and other areas where McCain's in the company of jihadist and rebel leaders, and specifically these militant jihadists in Libya, and also in Iraq. So it's very interesting. People are starting to say in the Middle East that wherever McCain goes, the jihadists follow. And so you see all of this coming about, and it's the whole thing, as I've been saying over and over again, is don't look at the show business. Please understand what the main program is here, and that is back to the Council on Foreign Relations and its members that want a new world order. That's what this is all about. And that's why I say these are a bunch of hypocrites. And it even gets worse than this. I just haven't got time to do it because we like to keep these things short. But at any rate, take a look at what these men are doing in the name of the Republican Party, in the name of conservatism. They're born-again conservatives, as I said, when it comes to being elected. But when it comes to their actions, it's something entirely different. Don't listen to what they say. Look at what they do. And when you see what they do and how it all ties together, then the picture starts to emerge that these individuals are building something that in the name of Americanism and in the name of conservatism and in the name of the Republican Party and everything else, that is entirely different from what you think. Until next week, we'll see you then.